Welcome to Empty Mentor, where we fill our cups and share our wisdom together. I am your host, Jennifer Hicks, and I am a board-certified music therapist and licensed educator with over 20 years of experience as a clinician, educator, supervisor, and mentor. You can learn more about me and our Empty Mentor podcast and membership group on my website at www.joyfulnoisesllc.com. You can click on the link at the bottom of the homepage to receive a free infographic and periodic updates, including previews of upcoming podcast guests and episodes. It is an honor to welcome our guest mentor for this episode, Ami Kunimura. Ami Kunimura, MA, MTBC, is the founder of the Self-Care Institute and provides therapeutic support for professionals around the world who are experiencing burnout. Ami has been a board-certified music therapist since 2006, specializing in mental health, trauma, and addictions treatment. Ami also holds certifications in yoga education and first and second degree Reiki, with training in mindfulness and meditation. She is currently pursuing a PhD in mind-body medicine at Saybrook University. Welcome, Ami.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's really nice to be here and to hear your voice. And, just being here with you right now, this very strong memory just popped into my head. And it was of the last time I saw you in person, which was in March at the GLR conference. And this was so special because this was one of the last normal moments before the pandemic.
Yes.
And so the GLR conference, I did a pre-conference CMT for one day. And then the next day I was just going to fly out. So I missed the actual conference, but I did the keynote at the student passages. And then I was going to fly out a few hours later. So I was sitting in the hotel lobby, getting ready for my keynote. And you came and sat at this big table right across from me. And we got to chat, and your friend came down. We're sharing our snacks, and there are other music therapists around. And I just think of that memory of us, being in a public space, and coronavirus had just kind of entered the United States. It wasn't something that we were freaking out about yet, but it was one of the last moments of having this sort of normalized social situation. Because right after that, I went and gave the keynote, then went straight onto an airplane, and that's when everything changed for me. Because the vibe at the airport was just so different, and I had brought a mask and gloves with me. My cousin's a dentist and gave me this stuff, and I really wasn't sure if I should use it. But that's when it started for me, that COVID anxiety. And it was that moment with you was the last little bit of normalcy. And I think I'm so glad I enjoyed it when I did, and that I do have that distinct memory of us just talking, and I wasn't thinking, oh, you're not wearing a mask, I'm not wearing a mask, is it safe, and this or that. But it was really special to think of that. I'm glad it was with you.
Oh, it was a special memory for me too, and I am so grateful for that time that we had in person together. And my husband often uses the term spontaneous timelessness.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
And that's what that felt like, because it was the spontaneous gathering. And I was so grateful that you were there to have the chance just to visit.
Yeah.
Not with any agenda, not with any topics, but just to spend time together. And as you said, we had snacks that we were sharing at the table, and we didn't have anything we needed to do. And so we were all we spent several hours there actually. And just greeting people as they came in, hugging, saying hello, just having the chance to connect.
Yeah.
And I think now about how precious that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I miss that a lot. I do. But I'm also glad that we can connect this way too. This is also so meaningful.
We've had to become more intentional about it.
Yes.
And I know for me, that has been a gift of this time, has been learning to be much more intentional of making sure that we have these opportunities to connect.
Oh, me too.
And I'm so grateful that you said yes to this, to be able to connect too with a wider group, and maybe some of those students who were at that conference and got to hear you speak in the keynote are listening and can comment as well. Thank you. Thank you for that memory, and thank you for
You're
being
welcome.
here.
You're welcome.
I have really appreciated your openness about your journey in
Mhm.
music therapy and life, and would love to give you some space here as we start just to share a little bit about your journey and the work that you're doing now with those who are listening.
Yeah, sure. So my journey was a surprise to me. My original life plan was to become an optometrist. I kind of chose that because I didn't know what else to do with my life, and I thought,
Mhm.
I could probably be good at that. And I was on a pre-optometry track through undergrad. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology, but I was on a pre-optometry track. But luckily, I had chosen that psychology degree because it came in really handy once I decided on music therapy. But I graduated in May of 2001. A few months later, September 11th happened, which
Mm.
became sort of a big existential crisis for me. I had realized that life is short and that I hadn't actually made a conscious decision to become an optometrist. It was just kind of this fallback plan because I didn't know what else to do. So
Mhm.
that sent me, into just asking this bigger question of no, what do I want to do? What's calling to me? And that's when I saw music therapy as a job listing. I thought, oh, maybe I can do this with my psychology degree. And I could kind of play guitar, like not really. But then I learned you need to be board certified. And, it just kind of led me down this path of seeing, okay, what would be the next step? Because it was, once I saw
Mhm.
the term music therapy, like my heart just knew and it had to go down
Ah.
that path. And it was really hard for me because, again, I wasn't really a musician. I could kind of play, but I had to learn how to play music, how to read music. So I went back to school. The last thing I wanted to do then was to go back to undergrad, but I did it anyway. And I'm just so glad that I did. And it wasn't the easiest thing, but it was the necessary thing, I feel like, for my soul's growth and who I was as a person. And it was just that idea of like, my heart was calling to me and I couldn't keep it
Mhm.
quiet. And
Yeah.
so I followed the path of music therapy, and that eventually led me to doing my internship at a mental health facility. I originally thought I wanted to be a music therapist working with children. For some reason, that sounded really good. But when I actually started doing that, it was so exhausting for me. But when I
Mhm.
went to try a field replacement in like a mental health institution, I ended up loving it. And that was so surprising to me. And so I did my internship in mental health, and then I eventually got a full time job at an inpatient psychiatric hospital on the trauma unit. And I loved the work so much. So I was working in a
Mhm.
trauma program, an eating disorders program, and a sex addiction program, doing music therapy groups with them every day. And so again, I loved the work, but within a few years, I burnt out. The
Mm.
work was extremely emotionally heavy and exhausting. And I just think at the time, I didn't understand how to process that. And also at the time, I was just feeling this restlessness of like I wanted to see the world too. And that was in me
Mhm.
at the time. I was in my like late 20s. I was single. I was like, had my own apartment, but like I wasn't making
Mhm.
enough money to save money. And I felt like I was just walking on this treadmill and I was like, where am I going? Like I'm doing well in my work, but that's not the only thing that matters here. And so
Yes.
it was really the burnout that led me to quitting my job because I felt like I like really need to get back in touch with myself. And so I ended up quitting my job and traveling around the world. I went to India for a few months. I stayed at an ashram and did my yoga teacher training there. I went
Mhm.
to Bali. I traveled around Europe. I came back to Hawaii to see my parents and stayed here for a few months. And that was a way for me to really get back in touch with myself and think again of that important question. What do I want to do? What was going to fit me
Mhm.
here? And so that's when I opened my private practice. I thought, this will give me more freedom, more a little bit more control over my life. Maybe I can even make more money, and maybe this will be something that fits my personality better. And it did. But a few years into that, again, burnout came on again in a different way. I think burnout that time came in more as like my own insecurities were really draining me. It was my first time
Yes.
this. I didn't really know what I was doing. And, I was pushing myself clinically, which was good, but I just felt like so insecure at times. And so that led me to going and getting my master's degree in music therapy. And I've always loved being a student. And so um, it might seem weird that, I felt stressed out and overwhelmed and burnout. Then I, added, master's degree and graduate program, but it actually really helped because it gave me more structure, because sometimes busier you are, and you need to like really manage your time better. And then it gave me a support system, and I think I was really needing that with the cohort that I was in, and we're still really close, and the teachers too. This was the graduate program at St. Mary of the Woods College, and it gave me the support system that I needed, and other music to talk to or to turn to. And it was when it came time to write my thesis that I thought, I'm gonna explore self-care and burnout. And I mostly did that to understand my own experiences. Like, why does this keep happening to me when I love my work? Like, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
But like, how could something I love be draining? It didn't make sense. I thought someone who's burning out is someone who's like just older and like kind of just over it and ready to retire. But why would this be happening to me when I'm, pretty young and new professional? Like, this was so confusing. But when it came time for me to do like my literature review and look at the burnout research that was out there, it became apparent that what I was experiencing was very common, and that new professionals tend to burn out at a higher rate than older professionals, and that burnout in the music therapy profession is prevalent. It is a problem in our field. Why didn't I know this already? And so, I put a lot of work into my thesis, and it ended up being a project where I went through all of the burnout research, and then I created sort of this guide and workbook to help music therapists. Again, really starting with helping myself. But when I was done with that, it was a lot of work, and I thought, I don't want this to just sit in the library and, do nothing. And I thought, maybe if this could even help a couple people other than myself, then that would be awesome. And so I self-published my thesis as an ebook on my website, and other music therapists started buying it. And it slowly just grew. And I started getting music therapists who read my book contacting me for more support, because they needed more support than just reading an ebook and doing a workbook, which is understandable. And so that's when I opened my private practice to serving other professionals, first through clinical supervision. And then I started what I just called self-care coaching, because I needed a term where like I wasn't being their therapist. It really wasn't clinical supervision, but they're coming to me specifically for support with burnout prevention, stress management, and how to implement sustainable self-care. And so that started to grow. And as my music therapy clientele shifted to now serving music therapy professionals, I realized like I'm kind of repeating myself to each individual that I'm meeting with. I thought, what if I could get everyone in a group? Because one thing about burnout is it can come with this feeling of loneliness and isolation.
Yes.
And that's one thing that can be so hard. And I thought, what if I can get everyone together so at least don't have to feel lonely in it, and they can work through it together. And it would also be a more efficient use of my time. And so that's when I started formulating the idea of Resilience Over Burnout, a self-care program. And so I created, it's a 31 CMT program. It's really long, but it is a place where professionals can come together and really dig into what self-care means. And it's long for a reason, that we can't just figure out self-care in a few hours, but we need to get to the core of it.
Absolutely.
And and what we've learned, and I'm sure you know this too, like we can't expect our behaviors to change, and like we can't expect ourselves to just go practice self-care and it sticks without looking at our underlying beliefs too, and starting to untwist some of our own thoughts around what it means to work, around our own self-worth, what it means to care for ourselves. And so I developed that program. It's been doing really well, and it's been doing what I hoped it would, of bringing people together. And that led me into founding the Self-Care Institute, because then I realized I have all these kind of self-care products and services, and I needed to not have it under my music therapy business anymore because it wasn't making sense. And so I founded the Self-Care Institute as a home for those resources.
Oh, that is so phenomenal, Ami. And you know that you have been a mentor to me in this work, in prioritizing sustainable self-care, and also about really intentionally building compassion and resiliency in my life and work. Would you like to say a little more about how you've come to focus in some of those areas?
Yeah. So really, I mean, a lot of it, like I said before, is born out of my own personal experiences. But really, it was a combination of that, but then me like really listening to then what other people needed, where it got to a point where, okay, I can't base everything off what I experienced and try to help people based on that. But it's like listening to the needs of the music therapy community, and then just stepping up and saying, okay, yes, I'll help with that. Just one thing at a time. And it's one conference presentation at a time. And, when it comes to the topic of resiliency, that has been really gaining momentum over the past few years. And when I look back at the past couple of years, how resiliency has become so important, and it became this word that people started using a lot more. And resiliency, not just being as, I'm strong and courageous, but, how do we pick ourselves back up like in a compassionate way and keep moving forward? And I think a lot of that was in preparation for this year, where we had to learn a lot of this stuff in order to enter 2020. And, it is a little scary. Also because, one of my biggest concerns is that, prior to March, burnout and stress were already big issues. People were already feeling so burnt out and stressed out. And then things got turned upside down. And then we started feeling these bigger amounts of stress and burnout that we actually didn't even know was possible. But those depths that can sometimes feel so empty and scary, they are teaching us certain things. And so, how, I've come to this work, and even just talking to you right now, is sort of being able to be the one to say, okay, I'm going to step into the depths of this and look at it, and be the one to explore it, and, maybe help pull some people out, but also look at what could be causing all of this too.
And just to know, for all of us who are in the depths with you, that we're not alone.
Yes.
That we have support to help navigate our way through this, and that we can walk side by side through this. And I so appreciate the work that you do around that. And we will include in the show notes for this episode too the links for your Self-Care Institute, so that for those of you who are listening right now and might feel like you're in those depths and may need to dive a little deeper, there'll be the opportunity to learn how you can do that with Ami too. And so we know it's a huge topic.
Yeah.
And so even I laugh at asking this in just one question. What would you most like the students and the professionals who are listening to know about self-care and compassion and that connection with resilience?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing to know about self-care, about resiliency, about compassion, that all of these things are skills that we can build. Sometimes there's this assumption that this should just be automatic. Like I should just know how to take care of myself because this is what I help other people with. But when it comes to ourselves, there are certain things we can't see or are hard to see on our own. But self-care is a skill that we can't just assume is just going to like come out at the right time in the right way.
Yes.
But self-care and compassion and resiliency, these are all skills we can build with practice that we can progress with, but also as skills we need to look at the application of these skills are going to be different at different times. And this is one of those times. And so self-care as a skill right now is going to look a lot different than it did a year ago. And so we need to constantly be reevaluating what self-care as a skill looks like, and then think about, okay, how can I now learn this skill? And like playing an instrument and learning a new song or something like that, really the best way to get better at it is with practice and with doing. And every day choosing to practice even a little bit, even when it's hard, and especially even when we don't want to or we don't feel like it. Like, that feeling of like, I just don't want to practice piano again. Like, oh, it's such a chore, but the benefits of doing it. Like regular practice can really bring big rewards.
Absolutely. And I love that because it creates the space for it to evolve with us.
Yes.
That because this is a skill that we practice for those of us that present on this regularly and know the research and know all of this, I know for me, going into this pandemic, I had to rebuild my self-care practices in a different way.
Yes.
They look different now than they used to.
Yeah.
And that was really important for my own care of myself, and also to just validate that for others, that what works for us at one point in our lives is going to be different than another point.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you right now, Ami? What are your favorite self-care practices for you?
Yeah, well, for me, one of the biggest changes is being in front of my computer like all day. And
Yes.
I had to get used to that. And it was both a mental and a physical challenge. Like to sit in a chair in front of my computer I realized was asking my body for a lot. And it was asking my mind for a lot. And these days it does mean taking breaks and, being able to like stand up and stretch. And I found, even I have like a regular yoga practice and meditation practice, but even that wasn't getting me where I needed to be. And I felt like I needed something new. And so I started learning Qigong this year, which I've been really enjoying. And luckily I had happened to join this like private class back in March. And like learning a new self-care skill this year has been really important for me because it's been feeling like rejuvenating, and that sense of newness has been nice in the midst of all this change. And this also felt like a good time to bring in a new skill, because in the new skill could conform and like support what I needed, rather than because it's hard to get our old habits to change and okay, you need to change it with what's going on. It's a little easier to get this new thing to come in because it's a little bit more fresh and exciting. And so I've been having this regular Qigong practice. And in case anyone doesn't know what Qigong is, in traditional Chinese medicine, so Chinese medicine has three parts to it. The first is acupuncture, which is a lot of us have heard of. Herbal medicine is the second part, but the third part of Chinese medicine is Qigong. And so Qigong can be sort of thought of as this it can be like a movement or an energy process that works with the body's energy, or qi. Qi is a life force, and there's lots of different terms for that. We can say prana or ki, or there's different terms in different cultures. But in Chinese medicine, it's called qi, and looking at our vital life force and how that's influencing our motivation and our health. And so I've been learning these qigong practices to help me get more grounded, to help me find more mental clarity, and to help me deal with the change that's been happening. And so I've made this an everyday practice for myself that, helps me feel like I'm learning something new at the same time, but that I'm also working with my own body's energies to be self-healing and sustaining for myself.
Oh, that is wonderful, Ami. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you are a mentor for me and many others who are listening right now. Who has been a mentor for you in your life?
I'd say my biggest mentor was my very first clinical supervisor. His name was Dr. Fridley. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he was such a big influence on my career. And so he wasn't a music therapist; he was a psychologist. It was at the very first full-time job that I had back when I was working on the trauma unit of this psychiatric hospital. And so he was a head psychologist on the unit. And I think he kind of noticed that I was struggling. And what he did is he invited me to his supervision group. And his supervision group were all like MFTs or therapists or psychotherapists. I was the only like music therapist or creative arts therapist there. And so it was really generous for him to even invite me into that space. I actually wasn't even supposed to be there. But I made it a point to go every week. And that's when I started learning so much about myself in the clinical process. And now looking back, I realized he was my first teacher with self-care. I mean, one thing I kind of struggled with as a new professional was gauging my own professional success by the success of my clients. And so if I didn't have a good session, like it would ruin my day. I would feel like I was a failure as a clinician. And he helped me work through that. And so instead of gauging my success and having it be dependent on my clients, and first, questioning my own perspective of how that can be a little bit unfair to my clients and unfair to myself, but starting to help me look at different parameters of, okay, if that's not success, then what is? And how can I start to gauge my own success? And he also taught me a really good lesson that's having so much application right now, that acceptance is not the same thing as agreement. And back when I was working in the trauma unit, and like I said before, one of the groups I'll do every day was with a sex addictions program. And a lot of the people who came into this program were court ordered because they were sex offenders, and many of them had been caught with child pornography. And so I was supposed to go in and do a music therapy group with people I knew who had been caught with child pornography. And so this was very difficult for me. And I brought this up in the supervision group is, how can I help someone when I just feel completely appalled by what I know they did and what they're admitting to? And that's one of the things he told me is that, you don't need to accept, or you don't need to agree with what someone did. In fact, you can completely disagree, but maybe you can find some acceptance of them at a human level. And I was able to do that, being able to work with these sex offenders and learning about their histories, because once I did start working with them, I started realizing what they've been through too. And it didn't make what they did okay, but it helped me make sense of, not being so quick to just label them as a bad person, but looking at where does this behavior come from? And maybe where I could step in and provide for some support so that this cycle doesn't continue of hurt people hurting more people who are going to hurt more people. And these days, I've had that in the back of my mind too, with people who I don't necessarily agree with. There's just, in this political and social climate, things are really tense right now. And that does help me just operate on a day-to-day level with more compassion rather than feeling so frustrated with everything.
Yes, that's such an important lesson, not only for us as clinicians, but also for us as human beings.
Yeah.
To be able to approach other human beings with that compassionate acceptance, and to be able to approach ourselves that way too.
Yes. Absolutely.
with our mistakes and challenges and failures too, to be able to still bring that compassion to ourselves and to others is such a gift. Oh, thank you. So how has one of your perceived failures or challenges in your life
Oh, I love that question.
Set you up for some later success? I just think one of the pieces with this, as we strive to help increase the compassion, not only for others, but also for ourselves, I think it's so important for those listeners to hear that we all have these failures, right? We
Oh,
all have these challenges. We
yes.
all have faced these moments in our lives. And in many cases, they've also helped to set us up for, I know in my case, dreams I wasn't even creative
Yeah.
enough to dream.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So failure that had set me up for later success. Yeah, so like I said, I started a private practice in 2010, and it did get to a point where it was thriving. And so I was running my private practice in Los Angeles. I was specializing in mental health and addictions treatment. And so most of my work ended up being music therapy contracts with
Mhm.
addiction treatment facilities. And I loved this work. And and I was going along doing my work and really enjoying it. At the same time, there was this other work trickling in of music therapists needing support, but I was doing both at the same time for about a couple of years. And it did get to a point where I thought, like, do I need to choose between these two? Like, can I do both? And I'm always
Mhm.
the kind of person where I think, I can do anything I want. I want to do both. But about 4 years ago, one summer, in just 1 month, I lost
Mhm.
two of my biggest contracts, like within weeks of each other. Now,
Ah.
this was a
Mhm.
significant portion of my income where it got me really worried by the end of that month. And it was a loss on multiple levels. It was a financial loss, but also, I mean, I had been working at these facilities for years, and I loved doing these music therapy groups. And, you know, these contracts don't always end nicely. I mean, one just
Mhm.
sent me an email and said, we're done. Actually, their whole facility had closed down. And so
Ah.
in that case, I was actually, when they sent the email saying the facility closed down, it was so hard. But at the same time, I saw that they kept me on to the very end. And that really
Mhm.
says something, because usually music therapy is like the first thing to go. And
Yeah.
I had seen other employees starting to get laid off, but they kept me on to the end. And I was really grateful for that. But I was sad that their whole organization had kind of crumbled, and now I didn't have any of that work. And then a couple weeks later, I lost another contract, and it
Mhm.
felt like a failure to me.
Yeah.
Not like had a lot of blame for myself, but I didn't get proper closure with my clients, proper termination. That was really hard. And then I felt like my private practice just tanked all of a sudden. Like
Ah.
everything I'd built up was like
Mhm.
now not there. And so I allowed myself to sit with this for a little while. And I thought, okay, like,
Mhm.
what am I going to do? But then I realized, I had been sitting with this choice. And maybe this choice was now being made for me, where I thought, okay, my choice was, um, cultivate my music therapy practice, or do I, start to explore this other thing that's coming up of this need for
Mhm.
self-care support? And so really what happened is that completely opened up my schedule. So now I had time to
Mhm.
to open this up, and eventually founded the Self-Care Institute. And I just don't know if that would have happened had that work not been taken away from me, because I just don't know if I would have been able to give it up, because I had loved it so much. And maybe I would have,
Mhm.
but just looking back, I can see how that actually did work out, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. But that did lead me into having the space, time, and energy to support other professionals, because it was pretty unsustainable to try to do both at the same time.
Yes.
And I am glad that it led me here.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I know for me, the pandemic did that. I could
Yes.
not have imagined giving up my clinical work
Yeah.
otherwise under any other circumstance. And I'm guessing that there are others listening right now
Yes.
who have also experienced that with this pandemic of having
Mm-hmm.
their jobs, their businesses change in an instant and
Yeah.
being able to find that calling through it, being able to find the
Mhm.
direction in which to go as a result. And I also just really appreciate your talking about being able to sit in it too,
Yeah.
to be able to take the time for the grief, to be able to take the
Yes.
time to be present with the loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
and then to be able to also find which is the direction to move forward from here.
Yeah. And that was really hard. That was very hard for me to kind of
Mhm.
just sit still. I'm a doer. I like doing things, like I'm very, very driven. But at the same time, that can
Yes.
sometimes work against me, where it's like, okay, I want to be driven, but I also want to be very conscious with the decisions that I'm
Mhm.
making as far as what I'm going after. And to sit with that loss is hard. And yeah, the losses we've experienced this year, I know a lot of people are grieving in different ways, and
Mhm.
we're grieving losses that were so unexpected and so big. And for, I know a lot of clinicians didn't get proper closure with,
Yeah.
things that had to end. And that is so difficult for our emotional selves. And especially because, a lot
Mhm.
of our identity is in our work, and that's okay. But it does become hard when that gets taken away.
It does.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of the new, as you talked about building skills and
Mhm.
practices around self-care, one of them for me during this time has been embracing the motto of grief, gratitude, grace.
Oh, yeah.
And
I love
so,
that.
yeah, giving myself space for the
Mhm.
grief
Mhm.
and being able to hold the gratitude at the same time, because
Yes.
there is so much that I'm grateful for at the same time.
Yes.
And then giving myself and others grace that we're all just doing the best that we can to navigate our way through this.
Yeah.
And so that has been my motto. And one of the practices that I've been coming back to throughout this time is being able to hold the space for all three of those things.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that idea that it can all be simultaneous. It's not an either or thing.
Mhm.
It's not that either you're in
Yeah.
grace or you're in grief,
Yes.
but it can all be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can be grateful and sad at the same time, or
Yes.
grateful and angry. And
Yeah.
yeah, that for me, learning to embrace the and, we call it in our
Yeah.
MT mentor group a lot. We're like,
Yeah.
okay, we're living in the and right now. That's
Mhm.
been a changed belief for me that has been huge.
Yeah.
What is a changed or a new belief or habit that has helped to improve your life, Ami?
Yeah, I just read this. So I've been reading. I host a self-care book club, and the book we're
Ah,
reading this month, it's Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And I've read
mm-hmm.
this book about 3 times this year. And there's one passage, and I'm just going to read this to you because I read this at least once a week. But this is what Glennon Doyle says in her book. She says, "In my 30s, I learned that there is a type of pain in life that I want to feel. It's the inevitable, excruciating, necessary pain of losing beautiful things: trust, dreams, health, animals, relationships, people. This kind of pain is the price of love, the cost of living a brave, open hearted life, and I'll pay it. Well, there's another kind of pain that comes from not losing beautiful things, but not ever even trying for them."
Wow, I just got chills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally all over my body. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And she does go on to talk about, she says, I felt that kind of pain in my life, and I've recognized it in other people. And she says, a lot of
Mhm.
times this shows up as the pain of a woman who has slowly abandoned herself. And, we can say also, the pain of a person who has slowly
Mhm.
abandoned themselves. And I just feel like that's such an important thing to keep in mind. And I've been really trying to embrace that, especially this year, as, I felt so much pain, and
Mhm.
knowing that there is certain pain that we do want and that we do want to welcome. And it's that pain from, love and caring about
Mhm.
things with like a big open heart, or the pain that comes from trying for something and failing from it. But the bigger pain
Yes.
would be not trying at all, or not loving at all, or maybe living with a closed heart. And I've been
Oh,
trying to keep that in mind as, I work through my own pains that I've had this year, that, some of this is necessary, and some of this is a pain that I did sign up for. And I didn't,
mhm.
particularly sign up for a pandemic, but I did sign up for some of the pain that has come with it of,
Yes.
putting effort and love into certain things, and being a feeling human being, and yeah, and trying for things. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's going to be, I often, when I do these episodes, there'll be just one of those pieces that keeps resonating.
Mhm.
And I have a feeling that one I'm going to be coming back to.
Yeah.
Oh, what are some other books and music that have influenced your life, Amy?
Oh, yes, I love Glennon Doyle's work. Yeah, this book Untamed I've loved. I'm a huge fan of Elizabeth Gilbert's writing.
Hmm.
Also, she also has a podcast, but they're just
Yeah.
two writers that really resonate with the way they express things, especially things related to feminism or being a woman or even just being an individual who feels a lot. Like
Yes.
I'm a highly sensitive person, like very introverted, but very feeling oriented. And those two writers are just very feeling and emotional oriented, but they're really good at putting that into words and, letting that
Hmm.
be something that's more of a superpower rather than like a weakness. But
Yes.
yeah, with music that has influenced my life, there's so much. And my favorite band are the Foo Fighters. They've been my favorite band for like over 20 years. I love their music
Yeah.
because they have so many different forms of expression. The Foo Fighters, they have their nice mellow songs, which I like. They have their hard rock songs. They have these like happy medium songs. And
Hmm.
Dave Grohl is like my personal hero. Actually, back when I was trying to decide what to do, I talked about back when 2001 and 2011 happened. I mean, September 11th happened.
Yes.
I was in this place where I knew I loved music and I'd kind of heard about music therapy and I had wrote in my journal at the time. This was like in like October of 2001. I thought like I wrote, I wish I could help people through music the way that Dave Grohl and Gwen Stefani do. I loved Gwen Stefani at the time. And I thought,
Mm.
and then I wrote that I said, I feel like if I hope hard enough, one day I'll be able to meet them. And it happened like 2 months later in December of 2001. I went to this like K-Rock acoustic Christmas in LA. And by just this sequence of like coincidences of like meeting the right person at the right time, I ended up
Hmm.
backstage. It's this big story. I don't think we have time for this here, but I'm happy to tell this in depth one day. But I ended up backstage and I met Dave Grohl. I saw him coming out of the back door, and I was just like, I knew that was my moment. And luckily, my friend had gave me this disposable camera I was like holding, and I got to talk to him. I got to thank him for what his music meant to me. And so
Hmm.
I was like, oh, can I take a picture with you? And so like I was there kind of by myself. My friends were somewhere else. I turned around and Sean Fanning was standing there, the founder of Napster. Napster at the time, it was a big deal. And so Sean Fanning took this picture of me and Dave Grohl. And I still to this day, I carry that picture around with me in my wallet. Because after
Oh,
that happened, I felt like that gave me the belief, like, no, I can make anything happen. And that gave me enough
hmm.
courage to become a music therapist. And I thought, if I can meet Dave
Yeah.
Grohl, like, no, I can go and learn these instruments too. And like,
Hmm.
his story to me is also really inspiring. Like he's a high school dropout, but he had his own path and it wasn't through education, but it was through music. And he's a
Yeah.
person who's really good at a lot of different instruments. He's also a good songwriter and a good communicator. And I really look up to him for that. And I think it's part of why I like that band so much. But it's like these certain things have just happened in my life to help me believe in myself and to help me like believe in life too, that, certain things will come in
Yeah.
at certain times and to be open to that.
Oh, I love that. And someday I would like to hear the whole
Oh,
story.
I'd be happy to tell. That's one of my favorite stories to tell.
And the next time that I get to see you in person, I am so going to ask you to see that photo too.
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah.
something to look forward to.
Yes, yes,
Oh, so if you had a theme song, would it be a Foo Fighters song? What would
yes.
it be?
The song would be Aurora by the Foo
Mm.
Fighters. You've never heard Aurora by the Foo Fighters, so you, Jen, or anyone else listening to this, go pull it up on Spotify. And it's not too much, it's not like one particular lyric, or it's just the whole general vibe of this song. Like, it just resonates with my being. Like I can just melt
Hmm.
into it. Like this being my theme song, it's more of like the song as a whole and the way it feels more than the way it
Yeah.
sounds.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I will say on my YouTube playlist
Mhm.
for this podcast, I'm not only putting the episodes, but I'm also putting the theme song
Oh, cool.
for each guest.
Awesome.
And so
Yeah.
we will have those two things connected for you there too.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Ami, what advice would you give to our listeners who are music therapy students?
I would say to music therapy students, so the time to learn about burnout and self-care is right now. It's not when you become
Mhm.
an intern or when you start working or become a professional. It's like almost everything I talk about when it comes to self-care education and burnout education. It's what I wish somebody had told me as a student long before I became a professional. Because for one thing, you can experience burnout as a student. There's academic burnout is possible,
Mhm.
but it's part of what we need to sort of embrace in our professional identities. And as a student, that's one of your biggest jobs is to formulate what's my professional identity, like what resonates, like what theoretical
Mhm.
orientations like sound good or feel right for my personality. And at the same time, we also need to be asking ourselves, how do I need to take care of myself as a student, as an intern, as a clinician? Like what can I start to anticipate based on, my own strengths and weaknesses or, based on my own personality? But the learning about self-care starts as a student and not to wait till you're a professional.
Mhm.
And, I also like to tell students that there are so many different ways to be a music therapist. That you can find
Mhm.
your way. We actually all do it a little bit differently, and that there's no like right
Mhm.
or wrong way, but there's so many different ways, and to start to find what your way might look like, and that can evolve with time.
Oh, and it does.
Yeah.
At least
Yes.
for both of us it has anyway.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, oh, that is so important. And we know that students get a lot of advice.
Yes.
So I'll also ask you, what advice would you tell them to ignore?
I would say ignore any advice about, there's no right or wrong way to be. And
Mhm.
I know there are lots of people giving well-meaning advice, and myself included, where, sometimes I do give suggestions to start with, the term you should do this or that, but to just be careful of that. And it doesn't mean it's wrong, but it does mean to, make a decision of whether you are or not when it comes to you should. But, there's really, there's no like right or wrong way to be. And, when advice does come your way, when it does feel like someone's trying to tell you a right way to be, to question that. Now, if it does resonate with you, to listen to that.
Mhm.
But if it doesn't, like,
Yeah.
that's okay. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
Oh, I love that. Yes, we always have to listen carefully when we hear those
Hmm.
shoulds and when we say them
Hmm.
to ourselves too.
Yes. Oh,
Mhm.
definitely. Yes.
And then question, really?
Yeah.
Yes. Does that resonate? Doesn't it? Oh, are there any other words of wisdom, Ami, from you or someone else that you would like to leave with the listeners today?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is from Jack Cornfield, and he
Mm,
says, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete."
yeah, I love that.
Hmm.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I also love to give our guests the opportunity to amplify other voices in
Hmm.
music therapy because they're just, as you said, there's no right or wrong way. There's a lot of us practicing in really different ways.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people doing this work that we don't ever hear about.
Yeah.
Um, and so, whose voice in music therapy would you like to amplify today?
Yeah, when I think of that, I think of you and I presented a conference earlier this year, is Music Therapy's Ed's virtual resilience conference, and along
Hmm.
with us, Nate Mensa also presented. Now he's really knowledgeable on like different genres of music, but what he kind of snuck in there, I was watching his presentation. He said something so profound. He said something, and this isn't a direct quote, but it's something along the lines of, be yourself. It takes so much energy to try to be somebody else. And he
Hmm.
is so right. And this kind
Yeah.
of goes along with, yeah, that advice to music therapy students of, be a music therapist in your own way. But this has so much to do with self-care and burnout too, that sometimes we expend so much energy just trying to be different than what we are, or trying to push against some of our natural tendencies of who we actually are authentically. And I know it can be hard to actually be ourselves and to, let our true selves out. I know that can be very scary, but at the same time, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to suppress our true being. That we do need to be aware of that, especially from a self-care perspective in managing our own energy, that sometimes doing the harder thing of being authentic and vulnerable and saying something that's difficult, that actually takes less energy than trying to use all the energy to hold it back. But to be yourself, and it does take a lot of energy to try to be different. I'm just so glad that Nate said that, and he's someone with a wealth of knowledge to share, especially about different genres of music.
So I love this, Ami, because you don't know this. Your episode is episode 3. Episode 4, which I actually recorded last week, is Nate.
No way.
And Beth Yoder.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. Oh, that's amazing.
So listeners, normally I keep it a secret, who's going to be the next guest mentor. But if you're listening to this episode, you'll know that the next episode, and it's one of the things he talks about, is that importance of being ourselves. And both he and Beth are really good friends. And both of them are mentors to me in musical wellness, which is something that was missing from my own self-care for a long time. And so they share about that, but they also just talk about that importance of, they talk about self-actualization and that authenticity and being yourself in all the things. And so they talk about in reference to honoring what self-care looks like for them. And it looks very different for each of them, which is really neat, too, to honor that piece. Just like you said, yes, he is so wise. And I'm thrilled that you gave him that shout out,
so
because he will love that too.
Oh, that's great. So everyone, make sure you listen to that episode. Nate and Beth are amazing people. They're very knowledgeable and have, very important ideas to share.
Yeah. As do you. So let's let our listeners know, how can they continue to learn from you, Ami?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is at my website. It's selfcareinstitute.com. I have a free newsletter that goes out every Wednesday. It's an email newsletter. It's called Take a Moment, where I share just self-care encouragement, tips, sometimes research, sometimes self-care practices. But it's a way to kind of get recentered in the middle of the week, to kind of take a breath and pause and get grounded again. It's one of my favorite things I do, is write that email every week. You can also find me on Instagram at Ami Kunimura. And you can find me on Facebook too. I host the self-care community for music therapists, which is a Facebook group. And I'd highly encourage you to connect with me out there on the internet somehow. And I love it when people just come by, even if you're just saying hi.
Oh, absolutely. And we will put those links in our show notes as well. I know for me, I love your emails every week, because it's almost like this breath. When I see your email come up, I just pause and I take this deep breath, and it's like, oh, that's right. And so the same is true for me on social media. When you pop up on my feeds, it's like, oh, I need Ami in my life too, even for me, and living and immersing myself in all of this. It is that beautiful reminder to breathe and to be compassionate to myself and to practice those skills and to build those skills.
Yeah. When it comes to self-care, really, we need these consistent reminders, these nice, consistent, gentle reminders that, wherever they're coming from, to make sure we have those reminders around. Because as the funny thing about self-care is that, as important and as essential it is so easy to forget about. But there are ways we can work around that. And that's to remind each other of it. That's to have conversations like these, to talk about it as much as we can, and to dig into, to asking ourselves, repeatedly, it's okay, what does self-care mean right now? Because it's going to keep changing.
Yes. Oh, thank you again, Ami, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you to all of our listeners as well. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to this MT Mentor podcast today, so that you don't miss an episode. And if you want to dive deeper into some of these practices, you can also learn about and join our private membership group at joyfulnoisesllc.com/mt-mentor. All music therapy students and professionals are welcome, and equity-based pricing is available. Subscribe to this free MT Mentor podcast and join our membership group today. MT Mentor. Let's fill our cups and share our wisdom together.